That's the latest. I'm Kieran Bangle.
Brace yourself. It's Andy Snowden. Stage and stage and stage and screen. Stage and screen.
Go ahead. Make my day.
Mrs. Robinson, you're trying to seduce me.
And you will know my name is the Lord when I lay my vengeance upon thee.
You ever seen a grown man naked?
Here's Johnny.
Life is a box of chocolates, Forrest. You never know what you're gonna get.
Tell me about it, Stern.
I see dead people.
Stage and screen.
There's a full moon shining and a joker in the pack.
One of the scenes from the fantastic Blood Brothers, and our next actor, and our next guest, I should say, has been in Blood Brothers for the best part of 20 years. Born in Liverpool, trained at the Webber Douglas School of Drama in London, and since graduating, he has worked in TV and theatre all over the world. Working as an actor, a director, producer, and a singer-songwriter, Daniel is possibly one of the busiest actors in the country, playing iconic roles, such as Tommy Cooper, John Lennon, and as I say, playing Sammy in Blood Brothers around the country on the West End for the best part of 20 years. These days, enjoying life with partner Shirley Ballas, he's kept himself busy by adapting his Tommy Cooper play into a one-man show and playing the part, playing the part of Hitler in the brand new Bollywood blockbuster. And I'm so pleased to say he joins us on the line now. And Danny, I mean, we've known each other for the best part of forever, really. And as I say, you're one of the busiest actors in the country. But I want to take you back to where it all started for you, and the Clwyd Youth Theatre. The Clwyd Youth Theatre, I suppose. I mean, you can think of a lot worse places to start for any aspiring young actor, right?
Well, it was, and actually, it kind of goes beyond that in a lot of senses. It was, of course, our old teacher, Gwenda Williams, and they didn't really know what to do with me because I was sort of spent most of my early days in a snooker club, you know, and initially I was going to be a snooker player, right. And I was, you know, and I got pretty good at it, and then of course I read the Jimmy White book, which was, I didn't go to school. So I thought, well, if I didn't go to school and practice, then that would be how I'd do it. But then I was told one day that my eyesight wasn't so good and that it might. And I thought, Christ, I can't do anything about that. That I can't work around that. You know what I mean? Yeah. That's your eyes. You can't see. And I'm like, this is going to be a massive hindrance. And what happened was they got me on this YTS, and I wasn't at all academic. You know, as a kid at school, I struggled very much, and I got into the youth theatre, and I was like, this is great. This is like, you know, because there's always been performance in the family. You know, we was always brought up at Christmas, especially with my dad, is that everyone got up and did a turn and this, that, and the other. I'd always do impressions or this, that. Our Faith would get up and do a song, and our Sally'd get up and do something. So it was always that kind of thing that you have at home yourself, Andy. You know, that kind of. You know, so it was always in the blood, but it really sort of found a whole new place. And they were doing the Nativity, and I got the role as Mac the sheep stealer. But I got that role and it was taken away from me because I couldn't understand the dialogue. Yeah. Because I didn't understand Old English. It was probably one of the best things that ever happened to me, really, in terms of, and I kind of like in that situation, it was so demoralising, and, you know, my confidence was shot. I mean, literally shot to pieces, and I felt so bad. I felt like such a thick sort of kind of no mark, if you see what I mean. And I just felt it, and I thought, kind of, how do you react from this situation, you know? And he came back, he gave me the part of a messenger and of an angel, you know, and I thought, you know what, I'll work with the messenger and the angel. And I thought, well, if I get this right, you know, and so I went away, and it was 8 lines, and I practiced those 8 lines every day, every night. I lived and breathed those 8 lines. I went for walks in the park. I went everywhere just practicing these 8 lines. And I remember one day, and I thought, you know what? I can do this. Because if I can do those 6, 8 lines really, if I can nail them, then I can nail a few more. And a lot of this is about confidence. And I think people forget, with experience comes confidence, and I'm not afraid to put myself out there because I've already been out there and I know what it feels like. So I don't mind feeling in that place again. I think that was definitely the biggest lesson that I've had just sort of across the board was that. And if I was ever lucky enough, ever got the chance, I suppose, to write a book or write something about what I've done. But it's how you react to a situation like that. And I think that's really key. And that's been key for me. And I think ever since then, I've always had a great work ethic because I've got a very hard-working mum and dad. And my dad always made me, even on the video trade or when I lived with him, he made me. I remember I knocked a garage down. And he said, I'll give you the £5 if you knock the garage down. And it was about a week's work. He gave me a £5. And then he took me onto the snooker table. He said, right, I'll double a quid here on the snooker table. I ended up coming out with 35 quid. And that was his way of to instill that work ethic, which I've always had. And I love it, Let's audition for college. And I did, to be honest. I only auditioned because everyone else was doing it. I didn't think I was good enough because I didn't really have a high opinion of myself. I always looked up to people that were there. I've always maintained that to this day, is that I look towards people like yourselves that, I haven't blown smoke up your arse, but it's the people that have been there before and done great things and done great performances. And I genuinely mean it when I say that I did look up to the likes of you. I did look up to the likes of, what your Phil was doing. I did look up because it was happening around us, and I still maintain that to this day. And there's people I've worked with since, and I always try and look to something and work towards that.
Absolutely. And since you left drama school, I mean, you've almost worked predominantly in theatre, and there's been a few highlights in your career that I want to point out. And firstly, a play called Waiting for Hillsborough, which you did, and it's based on the semi-final disaster in 1989. You were actually there that day, so I'm intrigued to what your experience of Hillsborough, the disaster, was. And I mean, it must be really painful for you to revisit that in the form of a play.
We used to go to matches. Look, when we were kids, my dad's been taking me to the match since I've been able to walk, and we had our spec on the Cop. My family is a big Liverpool family, they're from the city, and it's very passionate. It's very, especially on my dad's side, there's a lot of Evertonians. I think my dad's the runt, he's the only red, it always causes a lot of problems, but it was very much in our sort of DNA, even from the very beginning. And we went to football, and I was very much brought up to follow football in a very sort of educated kind of way. I love all the banter, don't get me wrong, but I could listen to my dad, and we called him my Uncle Roy, lived over in Manchester, and he used to have these parties that went on for days. And you'd sit there and they'd talk about, you'd go to bed at sort of 12 o'clock, you come down the next morning, 6, 7 o'clock, they'd still be sat there drinking whiskey, talking about the same thing. But their knowledge about the game and where players came from, how much for, and football philosophy and everything else was something that I picked up at a very young age, and I've always followed the game in that way. I mean, I'm lousy at playing it. I'm absolutely... I mean, they used to stick me in goal. My dad would be standing at the back of the goal, and I was in the scouts, and we'd be losing 20-0. And bless him, he'd be there in the pouring rain. I'd be in goal, diving in the mud, this, that, and the other. And I was definitely not going to be a footballer, but it didn't stop my passion,
Yeah.
But yeah, going back to your question is so this is what happened, and it was just a very much normal thing. And at the time, I was living with my mum, because right through my growing up, I spent a lot of time sort of split between my mum and my dad. It was very much, he moved around a lot. And so football became our sort of thing that we just sort of brought us together. And we talked about it. Was the general topic of conversation was to talk about LFC, and we just said, and this was just another day. It was another day in the car. We were very excited. My dad had managed to get 4 tickets for this semi-final against Nottingham Forest on the 15th of April 1989, and I was 15 years of age, and that was it. And it said, right, we got outside the ground. We went, right, take your tickets. Sorry, they're not together. My Uncle David, as I called him, because we went to a lot of the matches. We used to go to the matches a lot together, and they were literally in the 4 different parts of the ground, and my ticket was in the Lappings Lane end. And of course, when I left my dad, and I went round to Lappings Lane. It was, all of a sudden, it was something, we'd not been to that many away games, just in general. We'd been to Wembley in 86, and that was the first time I'd been to London. I remember going to Wembley, and we parked the car in someone's garden and give them a tenner. You know, that was that. They were my memories, and of course, Ian Rush, who was an idol as a kid, you know, was playing. He came off the bench and scored 2. It was an amazing day, but this was just another day following our team, and that's all it was. We were going to watch a football match, and as soon as I got round to the Lappings Lane side, there was problems. There seemed to be problems, and I wasn't quite sure what it was. I thought at first it was trouble. I thought there'd been some fighting or something. Yep. And as I stood there more, there was lads in front of me climbing over this these are very old ground, you know. It was a Victorian ground, and it's still there now. And these sort of walls, and these lads were getting helped up over this wall, and what's going on? And then I realised is that there was a massive rush because there was a main road behind us, and the police were coming down the sort of left side. It must have been about 1,000. It felt like sort of about a couple of thousand people outside going in through those gates. And this was the gates, the tunnel where they opened and, you know, filled these pens that were already full. And I went in, and eventually, but I'll never forget the police that day. I'll never forget I have it imprinted in my brain is this policeman on a horseback, just like almost sort of like a rabid dog, just whipping his horse like so violently. And the way that they were towards the fans, I knew something wasn't right. And it was just pushing people further and further towards the pen. Yeah. Eventually I went through, and yeah, I don't know, I just still find it hard, you know. It's just, it happened so quickly. The whole experience happened so quickly, and I spent the majority of the time holding a woman up who was, I was 15, I was on my own. You don't quite realise the enormity of what's happening in front of you. I don't think it really hit us until we got in the car when we were driving back. But I spent the majority of that. I remember there was an ambulance on the pitch, and everything was happening in front of us, and no one was coming to anyone's attention quick enough. All these people had been let into what they thought was an empty pen, and it was already full. I spent the majority of it trying to hold a lady up whose husband was being crushed in front of me, you know. And so that was my job, was to keep her sane, you know, and just to reassure her everything was going to be fine. It was that 6 minutes, I don't know what happened. It was like you'd been put into a sort of washing machine and put on a cycle, I don't know. And anyway, I went through this whole thing and witnessed everything, and it was so frustrating. I just couldn't do more, you know. I think that's always something that, you know, that you live with, you know. So I left there, and I remember almost feeling drunk, you know, coming out of a pub after a big long session on the ale is that you do in that sort of figure 8 walk, you know, when you do drunk acting. Yeah. You do that sort of figure 8. I felt like that, and how do I find my dad? And people were running everywhere. There was unmarked police cars that I'd only seen in American movies. I'd never seen police cars like that before. And it was just really odd, and I was just walking around it. It was like sort of an explosion or something that happened. People were just running in different directions and screaming, and I don't know what I'd just seen, and just people just dying in front of me, and, you know. And it wasn't just lads, you know. It was young girls, it was old men, it was young women. It was different, all kinds of people, you know. Yeah. I think people just think, you know, it was just a man's thing, you know, lads causing. And of course it wasn't. And we went home that day, and I think the total was around the 60s. I think it was around there. Mm-hmm. And it just went up and up and up, and no one said a word. Got back to my mum's. I think when I saw, actually, here's a really good story. My dad's got this problem with technology. He won't use it, like a lot of old people today. Yeah. My dad, because he was in business at the time, had a car phone. He was one of the first people in the country to have this particular type of car phone. And I remember finding my dad after about 3.5 hours of just wandering around the outskirts of the Hillsborough football ground. And I found my dad and saw his car. Get this, Andy. There's a queue of 30 or 40 people coming from his car, and they were all using the phone to call their loved ones to say that they were okay. Yeah. And I always go back to him and I say, you hate technology? I said, do you remember that day about the phone? Because I always try and get to use it. You know, you can FaceTime, you can do this, you can do, and you know, it's invaluable, you know, if you work away a lot or whatever. So I kind of reflect on that story a lot with him. And he goes, I know what you're going to say. Anyway, and I bring up that story, but it was a great story about technology and how it really sort of came into its fore in those sort of very early days. You know, it was a big Del Boy phone, you know what I mean? It took up so much. Anyway, what happened after that was I became very resentful because I don't think no one had really sort of asked me how I was, because I don't really know what had happened and what I'd witnessed. No one would talk about it with me. My mother wouldn't talk about it. My dad didn't want to talk about it. So I felt, well, maybe I shouldn't talk about it. But quietly, I was kind of dealing with it. And I don't know what I was just dealing with and why it was happened. And did I do something wrong? And if I was responsible, did I, you know, and it's been a lot of years struggling with that, is did I help create a situation where people, you know, died? And I carried that guilt for many years. I certainly became resentful to school, and I became resentful to a lot of things because of that, because no one even asked me how I was. And I kind of sort of detached myself from everything for many years and just sort of did my own thing. But yeah, that was it. But I think looking back on Hillsborough, if I could best describe it, it's a bit like a car failing its MOT. It's like lots of things coming together all at once, and it just all happens at that same time. You know, it is the CCTV cameras that don't work. It is the police making bad decisions. Look, we all make bad decisions. There's lots of things. There is too many fans there. There is this. There is the problem of. There's lots of things that come together, and that is what happened at Hillsborough. But it certainly wasn't to do with what was initially pointed out, which was trouble with fans. And they'd obviously taken Heysel, what had happened previously, into that. They were, oh, it's this again. Yeah. Of course, it wasn't. What I did was, after that, then I came across a fella that lived in London called Lance Nielsen, and he was doing this play, and it was about, you know, the story, the day as it happened. It was called Waiting for Hillsborough, you know, and it was just the day really as it happened. And we had characters that came through the centre, through the tunnel, you know, the infamous tunnel, and you know, could have been policemen. Rod Taylor, my dad, actually ended up having his character actually came into the play. It was Rod Taylor, Liverpool fan, and because he eventually started to open up about it, we had conversations where he was on the pitch, and he was using the advertising hoarding as a stretchers, you know, to sort of help resuscitate people. I'll never forget him saying to me that a kid tried to get past him to a policeman, and he was younger than me actually. He was about 13, and he said to the police, he said, "Can you go and help me dad? My dad's dying in there, he's getting crushed." And the policeman knocked him to the floor with a truncheon. My dad witnessed that, and this was a kid. And that was the desperation of that day. So no wonder my dad didn't want to sort of talk about it. Yeah. But also he's from a generation where they don't talk about stuff, where they're brought up not to talk about this stuff, because they come from the generation after that is the war generation. Anyway, I ended up doing this play because it was my way of dealing with it. And I was also like, why is a fella from London writing about this? And I wanted to get to know this fella a bit more, and I kind of ended up getting involved with it because I thought it'd be kind of quite sort of good, some kind of therapy as well. Yeah. And I did it, and there was another lad that was there that was in it. I don't know if you remember Ziggy from Grange Hill, George Christopher,
yes,
an actor from Liverpool. Yeah. He was also there that day, so we kind of hit off. We got a bit of a bond, you know. And I remember one day we did this play, and I hate to say this, but you know, there was a very well-known actor that came into the room that day, and we were going to pull the whole play. I won't mention his name because I don't want to. I don't think that's fair. But he was a big name Liverpool actor. And he came in and he went, you know, and he was telling us about the struggles and why we shouldn't pull this play, because some of the people that were involved with it needed to pay their bills in London. I mean, it was fine for me. I was doing it for different reasons, but no one was getting paid on the project. And so they were going to pull it. I said, right, okay, I'm happy, whatever, because I've got a place to stay, and you know, I'm not doing it for that reason. And George was the same, and we were kind of doing it to help ourselves deal with it. But then we kind of felt a little bit patronised by this this guy and what he was saying, and we were like, and anyway, it went ahead, and we did the opening night on the Friday at the Mask Theatre on Seal Street, which is now the Arts Club, and we did a performance for the families, and it was one of the most terrifying times on stage, because you thought, Christ, what if they hate this? Yeah. And it's literally packed with just the families, and we did it, and we got a standing ovation. It was a very emotional day for everyone, but I'm not sure that really helped me deal with it any better.
No.
It just kind of reminded me, and I think that's generally speaking with Hillsborough, is that you can't escape it. I've not been able to sort of go anywhere. I'd go to a Chinese when I was in my house in Liverpool. There's the film. There's the big film, and I'm just ordering a Chinese on in there. Yeah. You go into a pub, the song's on, and everywhere you go, and you go through this thing, and you replay the whole thing in your head. I remember I really crashed and burned quite a few years, and even in youth theatre, I didn't sort of meant to talk about it because I was told, kind of under the belief that you didn't, but I was still dealing with this whole thing. I remember I really crashed in London, really, really crashed, and I was really sort of thinking about I didn't want to be here, taking my own life. I'm not going to lie, it's how I felt. And they put me in this room in Hammersmith. It was Hammersmith Mental Health, and they said to me I was bipolar, and I said, what? What's that? They said, well, do you get really high? I went, yeah. Well, what's that got to do with anything else? Because they were trying to work out why I was sort of having these really sort of low points. And I said, well, that's part of my personality. And I said, I want to, if I could have any help, I'd like to see a therapist, a counsellor. And they went, no, we're going to put you on these tablets, and you can only see the counsellor if you take these tablets. I refused to take the tablets. The tablets were to level me out anyway. As the years went on, it then reoccurred. It's shown its head again. There was another film, or there's the whole thing with the trials and the families. And I'd been very much involved with the families from day one. We used to go down to London, to Westminster, Getting Justice campaign. Yeah. So I've been involved from those very early days with the family. I have to say I didn't get a great amount of support from the Hillsborough support group. It was very much engineered towards the families, understandably, but not the fans or people that were there, not so much. And I always felt a little bit of resentment there as well. But you know what? I get it. It was the struggle and everything else for justice for those families, and I get it. I wouldn't want to go back over that. But for me, years later, I then crashed again because there was another song came out, and then I was actually taken in because I was really, enough was enough. I didn't want to be here. And I was taken into the Royal in Liverpool, and this nurse came out, this doctor, and they said, and I told them everything, and they said, have you ever heard of PTSD? And I said, well, what's that? And they explained it to me. It's when you relive something and you go back over it, and it's in slow motion, and you just and it just keeps playing, and it keeps playing, and it rewinds, and it plays again. And that's what I had. I had post-traumatic stress disorder, and I wasn't bipolar, because I've got friends that are bipolar. The fact that I get high or excited, or that's human nature, and I refuse to believe it to this day. But how quickly they were to give hand tablets out, I mean, it's shocking, really. That even talking to Shirley about the loss of her brother, is and how they sort of handed out drugs and this, that, and the other for people, and but that was then, this is now. But for me, was when I was in the courtroom in Warrington, and all of a sudden I'm sat there with the families, and I went to as many of those meetings as I could, and I'm sat there with the families, and there's a guy called Mark Corrigan. I'm sat there with his mum, his dear mum, love her, and I just looked at these mums. Christ, they'd aged in 25, 26 years. They just become old people just from this struggle, and they shouldn't have. And all of a sudden this guy walks in, and it was your man who opened the gate, who made the ducking field, came in, and no one could. It was a big gasp in this room, and he just came out and he just went, yeah, I messed up. I made a mistake. And I just sort of sat there, and I honestly, mate, I was so frustrated and angry. I was like, why didn't you just say that years ago? Yeah. Why have we had to go through all of that for all of those years, for all these people, for me? And you found it so easy to say, why didn't you just say it? We all make mistakes. People would have got it and moved on years ago. He would have moved on with his life, but it was just. And I came out that day, and I called my mum up, and And I said, Mum, I feel like there's a huge weight off my shoulders. I don't know. I can't explain it. I went into Liverpool that day and went to St George's Hall, and there was a bit of a vigil going on. And I said, I've moved on. I've finally moved on. And I don't feel responsible because someone's taken responsibility. I didn't do anything wrong, and I did for years feel that I had. You know, so that was kind of it. Doing a play about it was just a way of sort of dealing with it. And it was a very true to account play. It was the doctor on the pitch, it was the forest man, it was the policeman, and they all came through this tunnel. And as the play built up, of course, there's news there's been a disaster, and one family, someone comes home, and the other family, it doesn't, you know, and that's basically waiting for Hillsborough. It's that thing of two families waiting for their loved ones to come home.
When I ever see a dramatisation of anything to do with Hillsborough, it's always, although it's horrendous what's going on inside the ground, it's the people at home, or like for your dad. I mean, you know what it's like being a dad now if you lose your kids for 2 minutes in the shop. To
exactly, yeah.
Be hanging around outside thinking, well,
you get the whole Bulger thing. Things just come into, you know, Jamie Bulger. You know, your kid, our son, he just disappeared once in St John's, and you do immediately you think back to that. You know, I don't know, but yeah. Sorry, carry on, mate.
Yeah, no. That's the point I was making. There's certain things that you just, I mean, we do live and learn, and you know, the way that you were treated, I think people are treated a lot better now. We do think more about the people who survived, because there's a tendency to just be concerned about the people that didn't survive, but it's the people who do survive that are generally the people you need to be looking at.
Who's taking care of that? Not just people in disasters, and that's the challenge that teachers face, you know, and them being able to move on in some kind of way. I mean, I think the thing is with Hillsborough, what it has done is that it definitely unified the city in a lot of ways. I think Bill Kenwright was very much on the forefront with that. He was very much at the front uniting the two clubs, but I think it definitely unified. It was always one of those places anyway where people, when it does hit the fan, people come together and they will stand up, and if they believe that it's not right, they will fight it. And I think people should do. And I think, well, what with injustices against governments, so what people have done and taken from things like Hillsborough is that people have taken this where there's been injustices right across the world, and they've used Hillsborough and said, if they can do it, we can do it. And it's given people belief that it doesn't, just because it's the government, that we can't take these things on. We sometimes fight for what is right, and what was said was not correct. 250 police statements were doctored for a start. It's the biggest cover-up in legal history in this country, and it had to be exposed, because if you carry on with that, it's a bit like sort of racism, that it's kind of like it's ingrained in the system. We have to address these things. We have to address the system to move forward, to be better for the next lot that are coming through, for our children, you know. And I think that's really important. And I think if Hillsborough has done anything, it's given people a lot of belief, not just in this country, but to sort of, we've got Grenfell, haven't we? You know, there's another thing, and I don't think it will go on as long as that, but, you know, there's certain things there that weren't said at the beginning, but there's a tendency, could it go down this route? I don't think it will in the same way, but it's a similar thing in a lot of ways. It's just things that aren't being told to those residents, or weren't told when it happened, of Grenfell, you know, what that thing was and things like that, you know. So all of that's important. Is, you know, we want to cut a few corners here, or that stadium, Sheffield, was not fit for a semi-final. It wasn't.
No.
Things didn't work. There was no first aid kits. There was no cameras back. There was no policing. There was no things in place if things were to go wrong. There was no plans. It was, so we needed it to happen, really, I think, to, you know, just kind of move forward, I suppose. It would have happened there anyway, or somewhere else. There've been problems at that ground 8 years before when I think it was about 38 Tottenham supporters. If you read the Taylor report, the initial report about Hillsborough, you'll read 38. I think it was 38 before Tottenham Hotspur supporters were crushed in the same pen, came out with broken arms, ribs, all kinds, in that same pen. So the signs were already there. It was going to happen. It was just decided when, you know.
Yeah, it's and it's still raw today as it ever was.
Well, I think that it is, and you know, look, I just the genuine conduct of the press in general, and the way that they sort of, you know, they put stuff out there. You know, I mean, without going into it, you know, I mean, obviously, being with Shirley is that, you know, there's a lot of media attention, and some of it's been drawn on me. I mean, luckily for me, I don't take any of it seriously. I think I just take it all in my stride, and I don't read anything. I don't look at anything. I'm just like, you know, it's just quite. I just think it's quite funny. I mean, they had me down as when we first started dating. I got caught. Someone took a picture of me coming off the train, and someone paid thousands and thousands and thousands for the picture. I wasn't even looking in the right direction. I went, if I'd known that, I'd have taken the picture myself. Around. You know what I mean? I was like, I went, what? How much? I was like, I couldn't believe it. I said, and then they come out and said, oh, he's a train dancer. I thought, Christ, train dancer, really? Ballroom champion and all this. I was like...
Do you kind of get used to it quickly happening to you?
What?
Anything like that? Because, I mean, from your point of view, do you kind of get used to that sort of intrusion quickly, or is it still a pain?
I think, look, you know, if we were going to get above our stations or anything like that, we get brought down a peg or two. We've got enough people around us. I know my dad would or anything. It's just daft, innit? I mean, at the end of the day, I was with someone for 15 years who I absolutely loved. It was my family, it was my life, it was my everything, you know, and I'd have given me back teeth for it. You know, as time went on, it became more and more apparent that, you know, it was not going to move on, or it was not going to be, and that was the tough thing to deal with, especially when there's kids involved. I was doing panto at the Liverpool Empire. That's actually gone through it was the last week of the Blood Brothers tour, and I then went on to start rehearsals in London for panto for the Empire, and I got it in my head that I was working with Shirley Bassey. But of course she's on a Saturday night. Christ, if I'm not on tour, I mean, we don't, because we're always doing stuff. We're always been doing that show or being busy. It's a busy time for, you know, if you're a performer, you know. But if you weren't, I certainly wasn't going to sit in and watch Strictly Come Dancing. You know, I'd be down the pub with my mates, or, you know, I was making the most of that Saturday night is, you know, having a few jars down the local. I certainly wouldn't be sat inside watching people dance, you know, badly. So I didn't know who she was. And then I was like, and she's like, you all right? And I'm like, no, I really crashed this week. It was difficult. I needed to be in the rehearsal room as much as possible because it took my mind off what was going on. And then I went back home and I checked into a hotel in town, the Lord Nelson. Yeah. And you know what? I can't. This is horrible. It's just such a low point. And I think the thing is to remember is that Sharon is someone I spent 15 years with. She's a fabulous lady and mother. And for whatever reason, some things just don't carry on the way that they do. But, you know, she was always a great support to me, especially with Hillsborough, and a great anchor, and understood it. And she's a great mum and everything else, and the family as well. So I always like to try and keep it positive, and I think that's important for Sonny, and I think it's always important for me to be positive about his mother in front of Sonny and about their family. I think that's hugely important. So that's what we do. We keep it positive and everything else. But for me, it wasn't a big, oh, it's Shirley Ballas. It doesn't make any difference because I didn't really know who she was. So it wasn't really apparent to me. So I kind of thought, oh God, you're just a girl from bloody Wamasi who just dances really well. And then as time went on, it was kind of became a bit ridiculous. And, you know, you sort of pictures of you in the front page, and you know that's a bit weird. That is, what do they want to write about me for? But at least get the story right. I'm not a trained dancer, you know. I'm not all these things that you keep saying I am. But you know what, life, I always like to think of life as an adventure, you know, and it is for us all. And you know, it's just mad some of the stuff you end up doing. You know, I'll never forget, you know, talking to Mike Sub one day, and I said, "What are you doing, mate?" And he was just like, "Danny, I'm dressed as a crunchy. I'm stood inside King's Cross Station dressed as a crunchy." And I was sort of thinking, and I was just thought, this is just typical, isn't it? It's just as random as our business. And I think this week, should I say, you know, I'm playing Hitler the other day. in a major movie with with this guy. I've never seen him in my life. Apparently he's a big A-list Indian actor, and I'm just on a set goose stepping around the place doing being Adolf Hitler with all these Nazi slogans everywhere. And I'm like, how do we end up in all these bizarre situations? But I think that's just life, and I quite like it. I quite like the colourful side of it all. I embrace it. We laugh about it. We have it's good stuff to talk about in the pub as well, isn't it?
Well, every time Shirley seems to be on any TV programme, they always ask her about you, and she seems absolutely 100% smitten with you. I mean, do you think this is a lasting thing?
I pay her a lot of money, No one knows. I won the lottery a few years ago, and I'm just like, just keep saying it, and I'll sort you out. Do you know what it is? I think when you just click with someone, I think the thing is, obviously we're involved on a much deeper level, but from the day I met her, we just click. When you click with people, you click with Jan, and you just clicked, and you still click, I'm sure, but it's not something that Sharon used to say a great thing to me. She said, she had this saying called, never force the tide. And I've always sort of kept it. And I think, sometimes in life it shouldn't be something that we've really got to sort of try at, it just happens. But there's certain things that we have to change about the way that we live and do stuff. And I've certainly had to do that to protect myself, and also because I've got a little boy. And because you come into some kind of glare, I don't know, it's sound, oh God, that makes me feel uncomfortable saying that, I think. But what I'm trying to say is that I have to kind of protect myself a little bit, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And also protect Shirley, and also protect Sonny, because he's part of that, and that's really important. So things have changed a little bit, I was at a party and people were doing things that maybe that they shouldn't, and I just removed myself. I left, and the people were there. I said, I can't stay here. I said, you want a picture of me with all that going on in the background? I said, I just can't do it. It's not me being uppity or anything, it's a fact of life. You have to change what you do a little bit, but it's not a big deal. I don't find it a problem or a hassle. It doesn't, what people say goes. It's at the end of the day, is don't give people reason to, that's it. Just get on with it. There's a reason I'm with her, because of who she is. The rest of it is what it is. But I'm not with her for any other reason than just because I get on with her, because she's as mad as me.
Yeah, perfect. And I've got to ask you about Blood Brothers, obviously. I mean, for me, Blood Brothers is one of the best musicals in the world, and will always be hailed as such. It must. Can you remember the first time you started on that show? I mean, it seems to be a long time ago now.
Yes, I do. I was doing a butty round in Putney, and I got the call and said, can you go up to, can you get to Bill Kenwright's office this afternoon? They want to see you. And I went for this Blood Brothers. And I remember someone talk. I remember a kid, there was a lad when I was a kid, and he used to go on about Blood Brothers all the time. And he used to say, I'm going to be Mickey one day. And I was like, what is he on about? Who's Mickey? Why does he keep always going on about Mickey and Blood Brothers? Anyway, I was like, so I got in flashbacks to this kid. I was like, that's that iconic show, isn't it? And of course at Weber, Sam might tell you this, I don't know when you were taught, but I was taught to go introduce the song and say who it's written by. And I did Eleanor Rigby, because that's what I busked. I busked right through drama school to pay my rent. And I went up into this office and I went, there's this fella, he looks familiar. Bill, of course. And they said, right, hi, Danny. I went in there and I went, I'm now going to sing Eleanor Rigby by John Lennon. I got to Lennon. And Ken like, we know wrote Eleanor Rigby, Danny. Just get on with the bloody song. I kind of all got flustered. Okay then. So I got through that bit, and then it was, can you read this? And it was the policeman teacher. I went away, and my agent called me, and I read the policeman teacher, and she called me, and she said, he said, they want you to read for Sammy. So I was like, okay. So I went to buy the script, and I got the script, and there was no role of Sammy. So I called my agent, I went, I'm not being a diva. He doesn't do much in this, does he? He's not even in the cast list. And she's like, no, he must be, because they want to see him. I went, but he's not. It's not a big part. I'm telling you, he's got no lines. He's definitely got no lines. Anyway, he called the office. She went, he's looking at the wrong script. He's looking at the school's edition. So I was like, okay. So I got the script that I needed, and as soon as I started reading it, I thought, yeah, I can do this. This is like, this is right up my street. You know, when things just click straight away. I mean, I just got savvy straight away. And we started rehearsals, and we opened in Southend-on-Sea. It was in September, and it was Paul Crosby, Mark Hutchinson, myself, and of course Michael Atkinson, the late great Michael. Mad.
But it was bizarre, you know, because I remember, because I was in London at that point. I was playing Mickey then, and you walked in, and I don't think I'd seen you since your sisters used to come to the dance with my mum.
Yeah.
And I was talking to Paul Crosby, and then you walked in, and I went, what? And it was the most bizarre thing. And I phoned Janet, and I said, you know, do you remember Danny Taylor? And she went, yeah, he was in college. I just had a really weird sort of flashback to when I was a kid, and I hadn't seen you for God knows how long. And then you walked, and then when you said you were playing Sammy, I was just like, oh wow, definitely a definite Sammy. Flipping heck.
Well, I think you sat in actually on the rehearsal at the Phoenix, and you left me a very kind message saying. You said you'd enjoyed what I was doing, so yeah, it was good. I remember do you remember we were at the Phoenix, and I think you'd watched a bit of the rehearsal or something. Anyway. Yeah, it was one of my rehearsals. Yeah.
So I mean, obviously things are really weird at the moment, but is there any talk of it getting back together and getting the show on the road again?
Do you know what? I messaged Bill a couple of times, and when it first kicked off, people were just very angry with how it was handled. I mean, obviously it was going to come to this point where we were going to close theatres. I think from their perspective, it's that the industry was completely thrown under a bus in the way that it was done, because there's people pay insurance and things like that, you know, and things kick in. But just to say that they advise people not to go to the theatre, it was done very, very cruelly, I think, for the arts and theatre in general. It's been, I wasn't impressed, and I think he wasn't impressed. And for him, you know, and I know the office have already AV'd me months and months ago, and I thought, Christ, that's optimistic. But of course, it's, you know, for a producer to break even, you know, you may get away with it in some of those bigger theatres, maybe up in Blackpool or whatever, but they can't. They're not going to make money. They're going to lose money. Why would they do it? It makes no sense. No. So. You know, and that's, at the end of the day, it is business as well. We forget we're in commercial theatre. That show is a commercial, it's a formula. Yeah, it will happen again. I can't really see, until there's a vaccine, I'm not really sure how it will really sort of resurface. I think I probably said it before, you know, theatre has been around for over 2,000 years. Since the Greeks, you know, and it survived plagues, wars, and all types of different things. So it will return. It's just going to take a bit of time, and of course they need to be supported through this time. But how long can you do that for?
Yeah, but I was saying the other day that I think, you know, theatre and sport seems to be the hardest hit industries over this COVID thing, because, you know, it relies so much on the public.
It does, but it also not only that, Andy. It also relies on the people at the very top. And I have to say that, you know, I'd say I've always been brought up in a very socialist-minded sort of way of thinking. So I don't really want into doing politics, but I was very impressed with Andrew Lloyd Webber and how he's really sort of taken it by the, you know, he's really led from the front, and I've been really impressed with him. But I think we need more of it. And I also think that these people that have made a lot of money from these big shows, this is not just, this is a £2 billion a year industry. More people go to the theatre. I think we talked about this on social media. More people go to the theatre than they do watch football in the entire leagues in this country. It generates what it generates into the local hospitality trade, hotels, bars, restaurants, all of that. It's all the other stuff that these buildings do as well. You know, they're educational hubs, they're meeting places. You know, I'm very much and always been you know, I'm passionate about theatres, and I believe that they belong to everything. I'm not a big fan of that whole elitist thing that we kind of grew up into with theatre. I'm not into all of that. That's not my thing. But I think, you know, and we really need to sort of really protect them. But I think actors need to be more vocal. I do. That might sound a bit more controversial, but I think that we do. I think because without them, we've got nowhere to go and play.
Yeah.
You know, and I think it's really important. And I'm not talking about actors. I'm talking to people at the very top that have enormous wealth from shows. and we know who they are.
Yeah, yeah.
Do you see what I mean? We're talking about, well, we're not talking about a few million here. We're talking wealth on a level that is just astronomical. And you kind of think, do you know what? It would be good. Maybe it's happening, maybe it happens and I'm not aware of it, so maybe I'm wrong to say it. It does kind of feel like it's just always a bit too quiet for me.
Yeah, I agree. Hey, listen, mate, I've got to ask you about your album before we go, because the party is over. It's an absolutely belting album. How long have you been writing songs?
Since I was a kid.
Yeah.
But I'm very much... It's a hobby that got out of hand, I suppose. It's a bit like acting, isn't it? You know, but it's almost like sort of a therapy in some kind of way. Is that you can sort of write stuff down, but and I write in about 4 or 5 different ways, styles, and I love songcraft. Music's been it's a very big part of our family. I know it is with yours and stuff, but you know, my dad would play some of the Glenn Campbell stuff and Chris Christopherson, and just talked about them. He used to talk about them as songwriters, didn't talk about them as singers. And I was just very much, and always have been, into songcraft, the beginning, middle, and an end. Yeah. You know, then I realised that you didn't have to just write in that way. That songs could be 7 or 8 minutes long. You know, when I started writing a musical, which I never thought I'd do, but it's all written in a very sort of 1920s style, and it's set in the Grafton Rooms in Liverpool, where all the army used to go, and all the people, the sailors and everything else, and it's all set in that whole period. It's really cool, actually. But I just love it, you know, and I think the more you do something, the more I suppose you get better. Or
Listen, mate, it's been an absolute treat to speak to you. Thanks ever so much for that.
Oh, I've loved it, Andy. I really have. Do you know what? I think it's long overdue. It's just been nice just to chat with you, mate. We've known each other for years, and obviously our families and everything else go back years, and certainly my sisters and stuff. So you were always, and I mean it as well, the Snowdens were always the sort of, you know, the people we kind of, you know what I'm coming from anyway.
Are you expecting me to pay you now?
Yeah. You just give it back what I've just given you, so.
Call it a loan.
And that would be square. Yeah.
Hey, Danny, as I said, a real pleasure to speak to you, and you take care of yourself, and hopefully we'll all get back to normal anytime soon.
We will, mate. We will. Just keep on with the keeping on, and and if you can find humour in anything, then find it.
Yeah.
Because it's better than moping, I guess, isn't it?
Definitely, yeah.
I don't know. Our sense of humour will get us through, I'm sure. Anyway, all right, I'll talk to you soon, mate. It's been lovely, buddy. I've loved it.
Take care.
Cheers, fella.
Ta-ra.
Ta-ra.
The absolutely fantastic Man with a Scar from Danny Taylor there. Brilliant. Absolutely fantastic. What a wonderful interview. Thanks for that, buddy. And we've had a few messages. Meg says, I've seen Danny in Blood Brothers more times than I can remember. He is awesome. And Amy says, thank you for having Danny Taylor on your show. Fantastic interview. And James says, Daniel Taylor is my inspiration as an actor. I'm studying drama in school and we're doing Blood Brothers. I've seen it in Dublin and can't wait for it to come back. So say all of us, James. And Sam says that he really enjoyed that interview with Danny Taylor as well. And Guy says, great interview with Danny. Send him my love. So there you go, Danny Taylor, who is possibly one of the busiest performers in the country, and that excludes a 45-minute interview with me. And as he was saying there, partner of Shirley Ballas, and Shirley Ballas, as we all know, this time next week, Strictly Come Dancing launches October the 17th, and also as well, she's got a brand new book out called Behind the Sequins, where I was going to tell you where you could buy it now, but you know damn well where you can buy it. You can buy it in a bookshop, can't you? That's Danny Taylor on the Stage and Screen Show, and brilliant. Right, coming up in the third and final hour of today's show, we got Seth Lakeman. Does it get any more exciting than this?
It's the Andy Snowden Radio Show. It's the Andy Snowden Radio Show. It's the Andy Snowden Radio Show. It's the Andy Snowden Radio Show.